You've been dealing with pain, you've been dealing with some sort of tightness, some sort of restriction, whether it's just wear and tear from lifting, training, whether it's a previous injury, and whatever stretching routine that you're doing kind of throughout the week isn't working, your current training regimen isn't helping make it any better. Even if you're going to physio, you're going to PT, they're not even helping. It's helping a little bit, but not as much as you'd like it to. You need this bulletproof roadmap. I've had 2 career-ending injuries, LCL, ACL, meniscus, all in one shabam, tore my hamstring tendon off of a growth plate, boom. But I've been able to recover and still become the most athletic version of myself, setting new PRs, breaking physical limits that I had before the injury, and more importantly, living a life of freedom and doing what I want to do, training how I want to train, even if it's sprinting, power cleaning 275, squatting a bunch of weight, doing plyometrics. I now have the freedom thanks to this bulletproof roadmap. And the importance of this roadmap is that so many of you guys are just going about this willy-nilly. You should be starting in step 1, but for some reason, you're starting in step 3 or you're starting in step 2, expecting it to work out how you'd like it to. But I get it, you're probably doing your best. You're probably just trying things you see online on Instagram, just throwing whatever you can at the wall, seeing if it sticks. I've been there before, but dialing in this roadmap was the key differentiator and helping me be able to do weighted pistol squats after knee surgery, helped me get back into sprinting and doing explosive movements and plyometrics after a hamstring tear. And this is the exact roadmap that I use for all of my clients that I work with. It's a calculated progression that requires patience, that requires diligence, but when executed properly, I've never seen it fail. So without further ado, let's get into the bulletproof roadmap. The first step of the bulletproof roadmap is isometrics. Without a baseline capacity of strength with isometrics, the rest of the system does not work. Here's the reason why. Isometrics, compared to regular movements, allow you to get more muscle fiber activation. They allow you to get more blood flow. They're better for connective tissue health. They're better for tendon health. And this is what's gonna give you that baseline capacity, whether you're recovering from an injury and you have a damaged muscle and you have limited ranges of motion, whether you're dealing with tightness, right? If an area is super restricted, more often than not, that area is weak and it's guarding. So you jumping straight into mobility wouldn't make sense because that area is weak. We need a baseline of strength. Without this baseline of strength, we can't take that strength through a length of range of motion, and we also can't express that strength explosively with plyometrics. This gives you that baseline of strength, a strong foundation to build upon. Now for me personally, after knee surgery, I couldn't do anything that really required a full range of motion. It caused too much pain and my body just couldn't do it yet. So isometrics allowed me to get even more muscle fiber recruitment than I would have doing the full ranges of motion. They allowed me to get more blood flow, and they were one of the key drivers, the key driver in getting me from knee surgery to weighted pistol squats on the same leg. And obviously building that baseline capacity of strength, but more importantly, correcting any imbalances and making sure you have proper activation. Why is this important? Because there's so many undertrained areas that people have, whether it's their hip flexors, their abductors, their adductors. Ask yourself, when's the last time I isolated my hip flexor, my adductor, my abductor? And no, hip 90-90s, they don't count. I even had someone say, I do Bulgarian split squats. That doesn't count for your hips. They're not even the main mover, not the main driver. I'm talking about true isolation work. More likely than not, you haven't, and that's fine. I was in the same position. Now, that doesn't mean we can just ignore it. We have to address it because especially if you've had an injury, you definitely have imbalances. And if you've never worked these areas before, you have improper activation. So it doesn't make sense to move on from the foundation work when you haven't addressed these areas. That is a super key characteristic of isometrics. After my knee surgery, my hip flexors, my adductors, my abductors, even everything below my knee, my tibs, for example, were super weak and undertrained. I'd been an athlete my whole life, but I'd never isolated my hip flexors. We never did it in our college strength and conditioning weight room, never did it in the high school weight room, and so I just thought I didn't need to do it. I was so wrong. So this will allow you to correct imbalances and make sure you have a balanced foundation to build upon. Because if you have imbalances and you try to build on top of it, it's only gonna lead to further issues down the line. And we talked about the blood flow and healing effect of isometrics. Obviously, they helped me recover from my knee surgery, they helped me recover from my hamstring tear, but even to this day, what do isometrics do best? Say you're holding it for 30 seconds to 60 seconds, you're getting a ton of blood flow. Blood flow is healing. Blood flow is what the body needs. That's why the guy who put out the RICE statement, rest, ice, compress, elevate, retracted his statement because blood flow is the key driver of healing. Now, how do I use it today in the context of blood flow and healing? Because I feel it's pretty obvious how I used it back in the day with knee surgery. I leaned on isometrics to help recover, right? But even today, for example, yesterday I had a sprinting session. I woke up today, my hip flexors and my groin felt tight. It's a new demand that I'm getting used to sprinting again. And instead of just trying to stretch it out, do a little bend to the side, do a couple lunges, a little whatever, I recognize that these areas simply need to be rehydrated. These tissues need to be rehydrated with blood flow. They need fresh oxygen, they need fresh nutrients via blood flow. And I went into the gym, did some Copenhagen iso holds, did some hip flexor iso holds. I walk out of the gym feeling 10 times better than when I came in. So this is where isometrics are used in the context of blood flow and healing, even if you haven't been directly injured. And I use them in the context of maintenance work to this day, even though I'm long past the rehab and recovery phases. So tendon, connective tissue health, this is super important because so many people, whether you have dealt with an injury, whether you haven't, or whether you're like me and you just train really hard, you can't always be focused on the horsepower work. Horsepower work meaning explosive work, strength work, Olympic lifts, you're just trying to be as strong as possible. Because eventually if you're only focused on the engine and you never maintain the frame of your vehicle is gonna break down and crash. So instead of responding reactively to a crash and waiting until our vehicle does break down, isometrics allow us to be proactive. Because the same way that I do horsepower work with power cleans, with plyometrics, with sprinting, I always follow it up with the appropriate maintenance work of isometrics to keep my tendons, to keep my connective tissue healthy, because this is the base upon which we express the horsepower. So it's a yin and yang relationship, and that's how I've been able to recover from a knee surgery, from a hamstring tear, and be able to do all the things that I can do now. So isometrics as a whole are gonna be building the baseline capacity, the floor. Once you've really mastered isometrics for about a month, 2 months, 3 months, and I say master, I use that term very loosely, you will not have mastered it in a month, 2 months, 3 months. But after you've been very diligent for a couple months, then you can move on to mobility. What is mobility? It is not stretching. For the love of all goodness, guys, mobility is not stretching. And it frustrates me to hear this, but I have to understand where people are at because I was in the same position. I used to stretch after practice, after lifts. I used to stretch, after work, and I would stretch till no end. I would do like a couple sets of minute-long lunge holds, touching my toes, this and that, and I got temporary relief, but I got no real adaptation. Why is that? Because stretching is your ability to access a certain position. Mobility is the ability to produce force from that position, and that's where true adaptation lives. If you've been stretching and you wonder why your body's not adjusting, why you have to continuously have to stretch, why stretching isn't helping, it's because mobility is where the true adaptation is. Because here's the thing, guys. Mobility is strength through length. If we look at something like touching your toes versus a Jefferson curl, sure, you can hang low and touch your toes, but until you can produce force there, your nervous system hasn't fully accepted that position. And until you produce force there, your body is not actually resilient in that position. Because as someone who stretched very often, I still ran into injuries because I was just teaching my body to access this position and not actually be resilient and strong in these positions. Now, it's super important. We have a baseline capacity of strength before we ask our bodies to use strength through length and range of motion. Now, as we continue to build strength through length, this gives us more usable strength. Because now, let's say like you only ever did RDLs. The dumbbells are only going just past your knees, and you've never expressed hamstring strength fully bent over and full spinal flexion in the form of a Jefferson curl. That's usable strength. That's a certain portion of the range of motion that you've never accessed, and therefore, it's a portion of strength that you're missing out on. And additionally, it's a portion of resilience that you're missing out on. Because where do most injuries, strains, and complications happen? When muscles are fully lengthened. This is why we want to express strength through length. Because when we get good at expressing strength through length, number one, we increase our usable range of motion. Number two, we make our bodies more resilient because these lengthened positions are where injuries and strains occur. So it's super important we have a baseline capacity of strength, but once we begin to take it through a length and range of motion, now we can become more resilient in these deeper ranges of motion. Now I don't fear full deep knee flexion. Now I don't fear lifting something heavy with my back rounded because I've built strength through length. Unlike most people, oh, you better watch your back doing that. I wouldn't bend that low with your knees. It's not good because you've never trained it. You haven't given your body the adaptations it needs to be there. That's the biggest thing with mobility. It gives you strength in what most people would consider to be typically compromising positions, i.e. a Zercher deadlift. If I saw myself doing a Zercher deadlift with 365 pounds like I have before, I'd be like, what in the world am I thinking lifting that weight with a rounded back? But what I didn't understand is that you can develop strength and resilience there. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes a progression, but mobility is the vehicle in which we do that. So guys, once we've developed a baseline of strength, and we've begun to take that strength through a length and range of motion, through mobility, now we have a strong foundation, we have more usable strength, and our bodies are more resilient. This is where we can introduce plyometrics. There's a wide range of plyometrics, from pogo jumps to squat jumps. I would even go as far to say like sprinting to a degree is a plyometric. Now, why would plyometrics be the last step? Because they're the true horsepower work. When I say horsepower work, this is like the juice of your nervous system. It's your ability to express force quickly and reactively and be twitchy at the drop of a hat. And this may be like, well, okay, why do I need that? I'm 35 years old. Guys, this twitchiness is where your youthfulness comes from. The reason you don't feel young anymore is because you walk into the gym, you do your lat pull downs at your own pace, you might do some bench press and back squat, but it's such a slow, lethargic pace that your nervous system no longer is used to producing force quickly at the drop of a hat, which is the biggest characteristic of youthfulness, our ability to be springy and elastic. Now, do our bodies maintain the same level of function over time? Obviously not. It's no secret. But there's a reason why you do see people your same age in the gym looking more alive and doing this crazy stuff. It's because they continued to use it, therefore they didn't lose it. So now that you have no imbalances, thanks to isometrics, and no pain, thanks to isometrics, and you have a more resilient body, thanks to really both of these guys here, now we can implement the nervous system juice. This is your reactivity, your springiness, and your youthfulness. Whether it's pogos, like I said, squat jumps, etc. And this will train your body. Now that you have a fortified vehicle, you can begin to work on the engine, and now running around doesn't feel scary. Now playing basketball doesn't feel scary. Now going for a run doesn't feel scary. Hiking, whatever, because your body is resilient, you have no imbalances, and now your nervous system knows and understands how to produce force again, and how to produce force quickly, because those are two very different things. But one key caveat you guys have to understand, even at step 3, isometrics will be your maintenance work to keep you fresh. Even after I do plyometrics, even after I sprint, after I do box jumps, whatever, I'm wrapping up that session with spring ankle holds. I'm wrapping up that session with Spanish squats to flush my body with blood flow, to get fresh blood flow nutrients, to make sure I'm reinforcing the tendon and connective tissue health, to make sure I'm keeping my vehicle, the frame of my vehicle strong while I'm implementing the horsepower. And the same goes for mobility. Even after I'm doing pogos and box jumps and plyometrics and crazy stuff, mobility is still used as maintenance to keep my body fluid, to keep my body resilient. Because after you're doing a ton of crazy, plyometrics where your muscles kind of start to tighten up naturally because it's a high demand, it's a high output demand, your body's going to kind of tighten up naturally. You need to make sure your body stays open and your movement stays fluid and your body stays resilient. See how this is the horsepower work, this is the final step of the progression, but the same way we had to do steps 1 and 2 to get to step 3 is the same way that we need to keep incorporating steps 1 and 2 to make sure step 3 stays doable, to make sure we stay as healthy as possible, even with step 3. Guys, I was talking to someone the other day. He's like, yeah, dude, I strained my hamstring and I was trying to do some plyometrics and I went for a run. I'm like, what are we doing right now? Why would you take an injured muscle jumping right to step 3 when you haven't even mastered step 1 or step 2? You're just asking for more complications. I get DMs all the time. Dude, I'm dealing with pain. I'm trying to do plyometrics and Brother, what are we doing here? You have to first build a strong foundation, make sure that your body's resilient and mobile before you even consider asking your body to do something as intensive as a plyometric. Plyometrics are a necessity, whether you're an athlete, whether you're 38, 39. My client Paul is 38 years old, 39 now, and he's doing plyometrics because it helps him stay youthful and springy whenever he's going about through his daily life. It's a key factor, but you have to be intelligent with it. You can't just jump straight to it. If I try to jump straight to plyometrics after my knee surgery, after my hamstring tear, I'd be cooked. Now, guys, it's super important you follow this progression. It's super important that you exercise patience with this progression, and it's super important that you implement this stuff properly. You can't just throw isometrics in willy-nilly. You can't just throw mobility in willy-nilly, and you certainly can't just jump to step 3 whenever you feel like it. This requires structure, this requires a system, but this is the roadmap that I want you guys to think about and consider before you go to your next training session. This is exactly how you're going to get your body right. Build the isometric base, develop mobility, and then you can express that through plyometrics, through nervous system output. This is the same process that I use to recover from 2 career-ending injuries, and it's the same process that I use with my clients. I'll put the link to my Instagram in the description as well, where I post daily content on there. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, the whole 9 if you enjoyed the video. Remember that with this progression, you need to be patient, you need to be diligent. You can't skip steps. You certainly can't skip levels. That's only gonna lead to more hardship down the road. I've been there before. If you made it to the end, I appreciate you for watching. Peace, love, prosperity. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.